Well, good afternoon, and welcome to our meeting of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. We'll call the meeting to order, and welcome board members here, and also welcome those who will be presenting, and also members of the public that may have joined us. I trust that you've all had a good Thanksgiving and that you're all remaining and healthy. And I also want to thank you again for being here today, and thank you for your service. It seems like I say at the beginning of every meeting that we have a full agenda, and today is no different. So we're going to launch into it and get started. Want to start by excusing the governor-elect Cox. He is in and out, as you can appreciate, getting ready for and participating in the transition. He may be able to join us from time to time. And I noticed Senator Henderson, who had joined us, and we welcome you, Senator Henderson, to our meeting as the new Lieutenant Governor-elect. And I'm not making any announcement about your role going forward, but we're glad to have you here in any event, unless you're prepared to make an announcement. So,
Mr. Chair, this is Spencer calling in. I apologize, I'm on audio only, I'm not video, but I'll certainly make that announcement. We're very excited to have Lieutenant Governor-elect Henderson take my spot on the board starting on January 4th.
Well, that's great news. And Governor-elect, I didn't want to put you or Senator Henderson on the spot, but thank you for that announcement, and congratulations, Senator Henderson, Lieutenant Governor-elect. I've had the privilege and opportunity of working with her this last session on a number of issues that were significant, and worked with her before that. I just have nothing but good to say about her and what she will bring to this process and to our board. She also served, was the counterpart, so to speak, with me in the Senate, served as chair of the Education Committee while I chaired Education in the House, and we had a chance to work together in those roles. So welcome, Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Representative Snow.
Just another little matter of some informalities, but important. One of our members, Val Hill, who has been a significant part of this board's work, and also co-chaired with me the Point of the Mountain Development Commission. Val is moving on, I guess the end of this month, Val, and after leading GoEd as director for over 6 years, is taking an assignment from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to be their representative in the Los Angeles area. So Val, this is one of your last meetings. I just wanted to take a minute and express my appreciation, and I think on behalf of the board, for your service to this board, but also to your service to the state and to its citizens. Under your leadership, GoEd has made great strides in helping lead our economic growth, and I know that that's in large part due to your leadership. So I just wanted to add that, and I don't want to put you on the spot either, Val, but you should be recognized, and we would be making a mistake if we didn't recognize your service. Would you like to say a word or two?
Just briefly. First of all, you're going to really like my replacement. He's a great guy. All of you know Dan Hemmert, and he's going to be phenomenal in this role. But I've been impressed by this group. What a great group to put together to help manage this big project and make sure that it goes off absolutely the right way, because we only have one opportunity to do it. And I appreciate Spencer Cox's leadership, and Lowry has been a real workhorse on this. I don't know how many hours a guy from St. George has spent trying to help us figure out what to do up here in Salt Lake and Utah counties, but I hope they're paying you overtime, Representative Snow. You've done a great job, and I am really honored to have been part of this group. I'll be watching from afar.
Thank you, Val. Anyone else care to briefly comment?
This is April. I'd like to wish Val the best of luck. It's been really fun the last 2.5 years serving on this board with you, and you were probably instrumental, you and Lowry, in allowing me to have an opportunity to serve on the board. So really appreciate you, and really excited for what you're about to go do. So go kill it out there.
Thanks, April.
Maybe I can just say I had the real privilege of sitting next to Val almost every week as we joined in the governor's senior staff meetings for a number of years. And I just consider him not just a great leader who's done a lot for the state, but a man of integrity and talent, a great friend, and we're going to miss you, Val, but you leave a tremendous legacy. And thanks so much for all you've done, for your support in this role and many others.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan and April, and Val. You have all of our best wishes, you and your wife, going forward, and I hope that on your return our paths will cross again.
They will.
So, I have a feeling
Mr. Chair.
They will. And you're still you're a kid, really, when I looked at your age. So you're going to be back, and you're going to be back in the traces, I'm willing to bet. So with that, let's move forward. The next matter on our agenda is to receive public comment. Pursuant to our procedure, we'll allow a member of the public to weigh in for up to 3 minutes. We may have members of the public who have joined us. If there are, we'll turn the time to you to make your comment, and I may not be able to see your hand. So if you would speak up, we'd be happy to receive your comment. Not hearing anyone, not seeing anyone, we will move forward. I realize, Cece, that I did not read the public notice that I'm required to, so let me do that quickly. And as I understand it, it's required by law. So let me go through that quickly, and then we'll move on with the agenda. I, Lowry Snow, co-chairman of the Point of the Mountain Land Authority Board, have determined that the December 8th, 2020 meeting of the board will be held electronically without an anchor location. This determination is based on the following facts. One, Utah is currently dealing with COVID-19, which has been determined to be a pandemic. COVID-19 is extremely contagious and can be deadly to those who contract it, especially those of advanced age and underlying health conditions. Number two, the agency offices in Salt Lake County are currently in the state's high-risk category. This limits the size of public gatherings to individuals within your own household and requires the wearing of masks and social distancing in public places. People are encouraged to stay in their homes. Three, a vast majority of the agency staff and the members of the board are teleworking to avoid unnecessary contact with others. Number four, the boardroom is insufficient to allow social distancing and reasonably safe accommodation of the board in public. Number five, the board uses an electronic platform which allows interested parties to view the meeting, hear discussions, and provide written comment. Dated this, I believe I signed that the 6th day of December 2020 over my signature as co-chair of the Land Authority. So with that, back to the agenda. The next matter is number 3, to approve the minutes of our last meeting held November 10th. I would be pleased to entertain a motion to that effect.
Make that motion, Representative Snow, Jim Russell.
Jim Russell making the motion to approve. I need a second, please.
I'll second. This is April.
April, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of our November 10th meeting this year. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. No opposition. The minutes are approved. The next matter on our agenda is to review the audit report. Law provides that as a state board and agency, we will undergo an independent audit. That has been undertaken by our own state auditor, John Dougal and Jason Allen. They have conducted their audit and review. And I will begin by saying, before I turn the time to them, that we really appreciate their help, Auditor Douglas, because, not just because you are who you are, I said Douglas Dougal, but because by allowing us to utilize your services, we save the taxpayer significant funds. So with that, as I said, it's been conducted by our state auditor, John Dougal and Jason Allen, who have joined us on Zoom. So, Mr. Auditor, we'll turn the time to you.
Mr. Chair, commission members, it's good to be with you. Please forgive any background noise. They're doing major construction here in the East Building, getting ready for the session. I think they're building 2 new committee rooms to try and space things out a little bit more. So if it sounds like my stomach is growling, it's really the construction. I want to turn some time over to Jason Allen, Financial Audit Director in the office, and he was the engagement manager for this set of agreed upon procedures. So Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and other committee members. We performed an agreed upon procedure with this year's engagement. It's a little bit different than an audit. There's in that we work with Alan Matheson. We worked with them to find some procedures that we needed to perform. It's the first year that we are doing this audit or this engagement. There was about $523,000 of expenditures in fiscal year 20 that we're looking at, and those procedures, I believe you have copies of that in the materials of the audit report, engagement report. And those procedures are outlined there of what we did to look at some of the disbursements and things related to some of the operations of the Point of the Mountain Land Authority. And as we went through the transactions and performed those procedures, we are happy to report that we did not find any exceptions with the documentation, with the compliance with the policies, procedures for bids and things like that are there. So we understand that this authority is going to be growing over the next few years. This is really kind of the first year of the expenditures, like I said, that we had looked at. And as the authority grows and expands in the coming years, there's an increased need and increased financial accountability and reporting to stakeholders, to the state, and other stakeholders as we go forward. The current statutes that are outlined in the report and that for the audit is an agreed upon procedure engagement. It's something less. It's just we agree some procedures. We don't really express an opinion on the financial statements or anything.
Jason, let me jump in real quick. For those that may not know, an agreed upon procedure, given the small size of the land authority, is more targeted on certain high risk areas, and rather than engaging the more expensive financial statement audit that's usually required for an entity with more than $1 million. That was the more targeted approach, just for those that aren't familiar with that term.
Yep. Thanks, Auditor Dougal. And so as it grows and the increased need, becomes that of an audit where we do express an opinion that and prepare financial statements. That's something that the board and management will need to consider going forward in preparing financial statements, notes to the financial statements, and that we do express an opinion when we do an audit, and we do express an opinion on the financial statements, that they are presented fairly in all material respects for that. And as we go forward into from here into the future with different engagements like this agreed upon procedure or an audit, the state auditor has statutory authority to superintend the audit or the services, audit services. So we could contract the audit out to another CPA firm, or we could do it ourselves. And that's up to the state auditor's discretion there to do that. And we'll work with Alan and others as a Representative Snow and as part of the board chair to come up with that and what we need to do and timing on that. So,
Jason, you want to touch on a couple of the key things that we tested just to let folks know how that went?
Yep.
I think at the end of the day, folks really want to know what did you look at and what did you find? Yep.
And so with that, as outlined in the letter, we selected a sample of disbursements. We looked at 25 disbursement. Well, actually, we looked at 10% of the disbursements that was there to make sure that they're consistent with the authority's purpose, that they had supporting documentation to back up that expenditure, that it was properly approved and in compliance with the authority's procedures. We also looked at the purchase cards, picked a month of the purchase cards, the transactions there to make sure that it's reconciled, making sure that the receipts are reviewed and approved by someone other than the card holder. And we looked at 2 timesheets to make sure that they're properly approved and within the budget, the budgeted amounts there. And as we went through that, we found no exceptions, as I stated earlier. So nothing rose to the level that we would need to report in our report here.
And with that, are there questions, Mr. Chair?
Any questions from the board about the audit or about the process?
Yeah, I've got a quick question. So, John and Jason, I may have missed this, but when will you circle back? When can we expect the next audit?
It would probably be done in about a year from now. So what we will do is we will probably springtime start to re-engage with Alan and board leadership to talk about what is the spend and the size of the organization. Whether I anticipate it will likely rise to the level of some type of an audit more than the agreed upon procedures, but we'll review that. We'll discuss that with folks. And then once the fiscal year closes, then we'll go through and perform that audit work.
Just what I needed to know. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Representative. Thanks, Auditor. And Jason, any other further questions? Any further questions?
I guess I should also mention Representative Handy will also work closely with legal counsel as well. Right, JC?
I can see her smiling, so that means yes. She'll work with you on those issues. And Jason, thanks for your report. And again, thanks for your help getting this accomplished for us. Saved us significant funds from our budget.
So our pleasure. Glad to help out.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is something I'm excited about. Everything on the agenda, but I'm really excited about the work that is being done with the with higher education and their involvement in the point. The higher ed is creating a task force to help advance innovation partnership at the point. Our Commissioner Wolstenholme, Natalie Gochner, and Neil Abercrombie of USU, Natalie of the Kim Gardner Institute, are, I think, all, I know Commissioner is here, and I think Natalie and Neil are part of our panel as well, to help talk about that task force and the work that they anticipate doing. Commissioner, you've been a real champion of these efforts, and grateful to have your support on this board. And your discussion today is really highlights the reason why you're on the board, but also highlights the importance of having higher ed in the development of the point. So with that, Commissioner, we'll turn the time to you.
Thanks, Representative Snow, and thanks to all the board members and others that are in attendance today to give us a few minutes today to talk about the task force and really what the intent and purpose of the task force will be set up to do. We appreciate Natalie and Neil joining us today. As we put together the task force, we met with the Council of Presidents and with some board members to identify who might be the best to lead that task force. And Neil and Natalie's name rose to the top quite quickly, and we appreciate their willingness on top of everything else they do to really lead out on the task force. We will be assembling that task force, and we'll have representation from other institutions on that as well. But where Natalie and Neil are representing the two research institutions, we felt like it might be best to have them lead out on this with the other institutions where they've already been involved with innovation and research on their particular campuses to move forward. But we do want others to know that the other institutions will be involved and feel like they're going to play a critical role in this conversation as well. I've asked Natalie and Neil to take just a few minutes today and talk about the purpose and the intent of the task force. One of the things that the presidents felt was very important, and board members, as we've discussed how we might best benefit and connect back with the board, we felt like it was important to have the presidents represented, but as busy as they are and engaged as they are, maybe to look at individuals that may be a little more connected to the research on the institution. And that's really the type of individuals that we will have on the task force moving forward, and hoping it can be an asset to the planners and to others as we move forward to be able to collaborate and discuss and to really think through how education can play a major part in the research and innovation at the point. So Neil, I think you're going to go first, and then we'll ask Natalie to wrap it up.
Thanks, Commissioner Wolstenholme and Representative Snow. Thank you. It's good to see a lot of good friends here. And I know this is a conversation that Alan has been engaged in for a while. I'm just going to brag just real quick. Utah State University hit a record year in research funding this past year, over $340 million in externally funded research. And I believe the University of Utah also hit a record this past year in externally funded research, over $600 million. So between the two research universities in the state, we're doing about $1 billion a year in projects. And then of course we recognize there's great talent across the system. So I'm thrilled with this opportunity. As Commissioner Wolstenholme knows, one of our past provosts at the university always would say that we would compete with other universities on the field of play, but collaborate in every other aspect. So this is a great opportunity for us to really work closely together. And Natalie and I will do just that between the U and Utah State, and then also other schools. I think even more important than just talking about our efforts through the task force to collaborate is turning it over to Natalie and the work that she and her colleagues at the Gardner Institute have already started to do, looking at the potential economic impact. I'll let her walk through some of those pieces, and then we're both happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, and great to be with everyone. I have called up a slide deck because I'm going to walk through some numbers with you, but I want to thank Neil and the Commissioner, and also want to thank John Downen with the Gardner Institute staff, who's been the lead economist thinking through these numbers, and then Keith Marmer, Jonathan Bates, and Patty Ross at the University of Utah. So our task here is to think about what would an innovation district mean to the Utah economy. And you'll notice that I've labeled this potential economic impact because it's all based on the assumptions you make. But I'll walk you through those. And as I do that, our sense is that this is the role of higher education at the point. We can be a catalyst and a convener. We can be a primary source of innovation, but certainly not the only. We have a lot of experience in tech commercialization. We can provide continuity for startups. It's helpful for us to facilitate relationships among universities, industries, and entrepreneurs, and then to be an access point to the campus-based resources. We don't want to recreate campus at the point, but we want to be an access point. And I can't resist but just share three context points as we think about this, and then I'll show you the economic numbers. This is some work that's now a little dated, but it's still relevant. We looked at the Gardner Institute, the Silicon Slopes corridor, and you see that red polygon there. That is the state prison site. And what's so interesting is in this 25-mile corridor of 17 cities, since 2010, it's been 37% of the increase in jobs statewide, and an annual growth average in jobs of 10% per year. This is all pre-COVID. But I make the point that, you know, our economy at large was growing at about 3%, and this corridor was growing at 10%. So this is arguably one of the state's most important future assets, is how we proceed forward. Last week, the Gardner Institute released the new 2020 population estimates for the state of Utah. And I thought it'd just be fun to take a peek here. Look at Utah County's growth in the last year, a 3% growth rate, compared to a 1% in Salt Lake County and 1.6 overall in the state. And then that 0.2% for the US, that's an estimate, but we do believe that this will be the lowest population growth nationally since 1918, if you can believe it, when we actually had a decline. But the combination of what's happening with immigration and COVID deaths and deaths of despair and the like makes it so Utah's a very different place. And this intersection with Utah County is a very different place. And then one last piece of context, I know you've seen this before, but this is some of the work that Alan remembers well from Envision Utah, where they looked at the buildable land supply in these powerful and strong urban counties. And what you're looking for here is all the gray area is built out. And then the yellow is a little bit of land. As you move to the red, a lot of land. And we say it's buildable if it's not on, you know, wetlands, if it's not already developed, if it's not on steep slopes and so on. But you can see Salt Lake County largely built out, except for, you know, in this southwest quadrant, and you can see where the inland port prison site location is. If I shift you over to Utah County, this is the real story. All this yellow you see in Utah County, and really all this yellow here, that's prime location. And if you look over to Weber and Davis, you can see in the northern reaches, you have the yellow, but built out in between. And so the economic opportunity here is so great. And I just wanted to really set that context. So we asked the question, how do economies grow? And this is, we asked this knowing that many of our peers in other states have done things with innovation districts, whether it's Kendall Square at MIT, Tech Square at Georgia Tech, the Innovation District that Ohio State University is doing. The reason they're doing this is that economies grow because of investment and productivity. And if you look with me left to right, I'm just showing you that what you have to do is you have to take a lower value input and create a higher value output. And you do that through investment. So this innovation district makes an investment in capital, both public and private. Higher ed makes a contribution by helping with a well-educated workforce. And then as you move over to the higher value, you've got to be productive. You've got to have productivity. And an innovation district with new technologies, new innovations makes that happen. So when you follow this value chain, you get economic growth. So our key economic concepts here are, we think that placemaking, or a high energy place for innovation and entrepreneurship, is the key. We're very excited about a One Utah approach that makes this a collaborative university presence. Certainly USU and the University of Utah, because of the research university status, brings a lot to the table, but others can as well. We've been using this term campfire environment to kind of create, you know, imagine being around a campfire and the collision of ideas that can occur. and then the scalability as you ideate and create new concepts. So what we did is we made some assumptions, and everything here is driven by assumptions, but these assumptions are largely driven by what we've learned at the research parks at our universities. So we begin in 2024 with 70,000 square feet and continue that each year through the planning horizon to a build out. We looked at some construction costs inclusive of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and came up with $275 per square foot because we need to know the investment to measure the economic impact. Then we made assumptions about the spin-off and operational employment. And we begin in 2026, so 2 years after the start of construction, with 895 new jobs and increase it thereafter. And then we have to make an assumption about what industries those jobs are in, because all industries have different economic impacts and multipliers. And we matched a targeted industry mix in Salt Lake and Utah counties. So when we take those assumptions, this is what we get. A capital investment of about $423 million in 2020 dollars, and direct employment of about just under 6,700. It's an annual average. It starts out smaller, gets larger, but this is the annual average. We put it into our regional impact models, and through that, over this time period, we get a cumulative GDP of $34.4 billion, earnings of $21 billion, and an annual average of employment, so this includes direct, indirect, and induced, of just under 12,000 jobs. So this is really exciting, right? Because this is an investment that is, for our children and grandchildren, and pays off over the long term, much like the investment many years ago in Hill Air Force Base paid off, or our investment in the 2002 Olympic Winter Games, or in the Intermountain Power Project, IPP. This is a kind of generational investment that grows over time. So in our modeling, this is how it looks, because we made kind of even assumptions. It would, obviously be a little different than this, but you can see the jobs in the darker line go from 0 to approaching 25,000 jobs, and the earnings go from 0 to approaching, I'm going to say 2 billion. And then I've got the same thing for GDP, with the point being that this crescendos and grows over time. And so I think the message is, and I'll turn it back to the commissioner, that we can make a generational development investment. It will grow over time. We have the ability to make it far-reaching for each university and for our citizenry. And the key will be to not underinvest in something this choice. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner.
Let me get myself off mute. Thank you, Natalie and Neil. Appreciate your great work, and we appreciate your willingness again to lead this task force and be able to provide the information back to this committee to help us make wise decisions as we move forward on the impact that higher education can have. With that, Chair Snow, I think would be open to answering questions or any concerns that the board may have.
Thank you, Commissioner, and Natalie for that presentation, and Neil for your comments. Questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one. Hey, Natalie, can you compare and contrast the figure of 6,700 direct employment within that figure of 12,000? Can you make a comparison again for me between those two numbers, how those relate?
Yes, I sure can. So this is the multiplier effect. So the direct employment is the 6,600. The multiplier here is about 2. So you're getting about 12,000 on an annual average. It gets higher than that, but we're picking almost the midpoint by picking the annual average. So I hope that's helpful. So one is the direct employment, and the other is the employment that occurs because of industry purchases and paying your employees that then go spend their money. And that's what we're getting there.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you, Representative and Natalie. Further questions?
I don't have a question, but if I can just make a comment, I so appreciate this information. Really, I think this is something that we've looked forward to, having numbers like this and data that really illustrates the reality of what can happen here since we got started with this project. I marvel that we had 29 people. We've grown since we started, but this is very valuable information, and I just appreciate seeing in dollars and cents and reality the potential that we have to do this and the impact that higher education will have on this area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. One thing I would just say that we will continue to develop this to give you some more comparables, but you know, the annual average of GDP is about 1.6 billion per year that we think that this can contribute. And that's about the same amount of exports we have in computer and electronics in the state. So that's just a rough reference point to think about. Another way to think of it is our with an average annual employment of about 6,600 going in. That's about the employment level of the U.S. Postal Service in our state. So we'll get some other kind of numbers to help you think through this, but I would characterize these as large, growing, and a real potential to have, you know, some sustainability associated with it, not boom and bust.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? I have a comment following up with Mayor Ramsey. I couldn't agree with you more, Mayor, what you said about this is exciting and incredibly relevant to what we've all, I think, had as a vision for this project going forward, that it would somehow blend with higher ed, with research and creation of innovation. So thank you very much, Commissioner. And Natalie, thanks to you and the work of the Kim Gardner Institute to put these figures together. We hope that you will be a continuing partner with this effort. In that regard, Commissioner, the establishment of the task force, is that in place, or is that something that's coming together? And how will the representation be on that?
Yeah, so it'll be representation from the institutions. I will be meeting with Neil and Natalie in the next couple of days, to flesh out who the remaining members of the task force will be. We want representation across the state of our institutions that would sit on that task force.
Thank you. I guess you know why I was asking then. Oh.
Yep.
We're down in the southwest corner of the state, and Natalie, I can't remember the concept that you delineated, but one Utah one, having an eye towards expanding the scope and the impact of this to the extent that you can statewide into all of our higher ed institutions, it will be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, Representative, I hope you noticed that I didn't even put red on my slides.
He would have been okay with the red, Natalie.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I didn't even do quite blue. I did kind of a purple, but.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. You know, we're going to move on here, and we just appreciate your involvement. And one of the things that people from outside our state comment often about is our degree of collaboration. And I hope you feel that here, and our support for what you're doing, and vice versa. We appreciate it. So with that, we'll move on with the agenda. And I think I forgot to handle one procedural matter as we completed the audit review. I should have taken a motion to accept the audit as provided to us by our state auditor. That would be in order at that time, and is in order now. If someone would help me with that motion, please.
I move to approve the audit report as presented.
Thank you, representatives. Move to approve. Could I get a second, please?
I second.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded that we accept the audit report as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It is accepted then. Thank you, CC, for the reminder on that. The next matter on the agenda is likewise very exciting. This is on the agenda to have us discuss and schedule a meeting sometime next week for final selection decision of our planning team that will prepare the framework master plan for the point. Alan can comment more on this, but I know that those that have been involved have been going through a really rigorous process of reviewing and vetting the various applications and hearing presentations, and has helped us boil down the applications down to, I guess, two. But with that, Alan, I'll turn the time to you and let you talk about what's left to accomplish and what we need to do as a board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of you. We ask a lot of our board members, and we're going to ask for another bit of assistance here. As Representative Snow said, we have been going through a really robust and detailed competitive process with a number of planning firms to select a firm that will undertake the substantial task of developing a framework master plan for this site in the first half of 2021. Steve Kellenberg later in the agenda is going to go through the details of that. But the next couple of steps are these. Number one, the selection committee has met twice with the finalists in charrettes. We're going to meet with them again on Friday individually and have them present their final presentations and proposals to us. At that point, we'll get together and develop a recommendation for this board. But the decision, of course, is made by this board. And we've set up a process and published a schedule that calls for announcing the successful planning firm no later than Friday, December 18th. So we are in a position where we need to set up a meeting for next week of this board, a separate meeting. I think it can be done in an hour. We would get together, give you some materials in advance to look at. The selection committee will make its recommendation. Then you can have some discussion and decide. We're trying to find a time that would work for as many of you as possible. And I sent out a little email a couple of days ago asking for your availability at various times next week, 4 o'clock on Monday the 14th, 8 in the morning on Tuesday the 15th, 4 in the evening on the 15th, or 4 in the evening on the 17th, that Thursday. So I said, I've heard back from 5 of you. It looks like those 4 o'clock times work best. I'd just suggest Monday may be a little quick because it won't give us a chance to get materials out to you and for you to be able to look at them much, but that's on the table. I'm wondering if 4 o'clock on the 15th would work for those of you who have not responded and whether we could get a quorum there.
Alan, this is Dave. That works for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Likewise, Alan, I can do it.
Okay.
Alan, this is Jim. I don't remember if I responded or not, but that'll work for me.
Thank you,
I'll
Jim.
make it work.
Thank you.
I
Alan?
will do what I can. I RSVP'd before that time actually doesn't work for me, but I will do everything I can to try to make it happen.
I know it's tough on short notice and you're all very, very busy.
All right. Is your calculation, Alan, such that it looks like with those responses and the others that have come in that we can make that work?
Yes, I think we would have a quorum. It'd be just a quorum, but that seems to be the time that works best. So what did I say? We could mention Tuesday at 4 o'clock. If Thursday at 4 o'clock works better for others of you, you could try that. All right, see some head shaking. So looks like Tuesday the 15th at 4 o'clock.
Very good. This is Alan's already mentioned, this is a critical meeting, and we've had a lot of critical meetings, but this one is important as we pick this planner and move forward with the planner. So CC and Alan will get formal notice out, I guess, and we'll make sure and get it on our calendars, and we'll plan on attending. That will likewise be a Zoom meeting, and it will be both in closed session and as well as open session at the conclusion, I would anticipate. Any other questions for Alan about the process or about where we are or this meeting for next week? All right, very good. Thank you, Alan. The next item on the agenda is likewise something that we'll turn over to Alan to discuss, but it is to discuss the proposed revisions to the conduct of board meeting policy. From time to time, we need to make adjustments to that, and this is a time that's now ripe for addressing those issues due to changing circumstances. So, Alan, why don't you proceed?
Thank you very much. Let's see if I can. Let's see. It's blocking my ability to access this. Let me just see here. All right, let's try this. Can you see that the policy up on the screen?
We can see it.
All right. As you know, we've adopted a number of policies to ensure that we operate efficiently and appropriately. One of the policies that you adopted over a year ago was conduct of board meetings, outlining a process that we can involve the public efficiently and effectively in those meetings. Most of this policy is unchanged, but this was really designed for in-person meetings. Now, of course, we're meeting virtually and feel like there's a need to make a few adjustments to the policy to ensure that we can meet the needs of those who want to participate virtually. So the first page and the top half of the second page are essentially unchanged. The real difference is that second part of page 2, where we talk about how we can involve people in virtual meetings. And I'll just very briefly mention they have a chance to participate in the virtual meetings, but to do so, they need to sign up on the Zoom before entering, so we know who is involved and who's participating. We will prioritize their comments, first come, first serve. We are live streaming and recording meetings, posting those recordings. So those that participate from the public will have to recognize that their likeness may be available to the public. We also are not allowing members of the public to share their screens unless they get approval beforehand, just so that we can control what shows up on the screens and don't get Zoom bombed. So we've got a process in place for that to happen. We have standards of conduct to ensure that anyone participating doesn't engage in threats or interfere with the conduct of our meetings. And then finally, and importantly, a piece kind of defining better what constitutes a public comment. So we do live stream our meetings on YouTube, and participants are able to go in and put in comments in the chat. We're making it explicit that those are not considered public comments. We can look at them as advisory, but if someone wants to make a formal public comment, I'm sorry, that's cut off a little bit there. They should use the virtual meeting platform, in this case, the Zoom platform, and they can put comments in the chat function or submit comments formally, and those would be considered public comments. And I think we do reserve the right to edit those comments only if there's profanity, personal invective, but will not edit them based on the viewpoint expressed. So those are the changes to the policy, and I guess I'd answer any questions or turn it back for a vote.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, I do. Can you hear me?
We can, Senator.
Okay, good. My question is about, I'm wondering about the difference between comments in the YouTube chat function versus comments in the Zoom chat function. And I could just see both of those platforms really lending themselves to peanut gallery sort of comments. Maybe users turning it into their Twitter feed. And I suppose that I might suggest that formal public comments ought to be a little bit more formal than just someone spouting off in a chat box. That if someone would like to make public comment, that there ought to be some way to submit those. But I like the policy that YouTube chats are not official public comment. But I would actually prefer to extend that to Zoom, just because it seems like we'd almost have the exact same issue and the exact same danger of the official record for comments being people just throwing bombs based on the conversation that comes up. While we want to hear well-considered public comments and even not well-considered public comments, I do think that there ought to be some more of a formal way to be able to receive those rather than just through a chat function.
If I might respond, Mr. Chair, I think those are very good points, and we certainly understand, and there's always a balance here between making sure that we're listening to the public and responsive to the public, and then also ensuring that the input is meaningful. I think there's a little bit of a difference between the YouTube and the online function in that, as we said earlier, those that want to participate online have to register in advance with their full name. And so we know who's participating in the meeting. They're not anonymous, but certainly they could throw some bombs. And again, if we feel that they are inappropriate, those could be removed. But anything that is expressing an opinion on the project itself or the way that we're conducting our business could be considered public comment. But so that's the distinction. I'm certainly open to board direction on how we handle that.
Thank you. Anything further, Senator Fillmore?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Further questions?
I have a question.
Please.
I can't remember, Alan. I mean, and it was like 30 seconds ago that you just showed us that. Is there a mechanism there? Do we have a link there where people can submit public comment by a certain time that's listed on our agenda? Are we doing that? Are we on the agenda saying if you'd like to make a public comment, you can submit it by this time? I don't know if we had that or not.
No, I don't think we've got that explicitly in there, Mayor. I think we've said that they can contact staff in advance if they want to present something or make a comment. So there's an opportunity there for us to communicate. We could make it explicit that we'll put some kind of a formal link or connection where people could submit comments if they wish.
I just am thinking about what Senator Fillmore said and thinking about different organizations just that I'm aware of, that I have the chance to be part of, and how public comment is taken in those. And I don't know that I know of any that accept a Zoom chat as public comment. People can either speak and be called on by the chair during Zoom, but chat, well, I recognize I recognize the reason that that's put in place and being proposed, but Senator Fillmore's comments made me think I'm not aware of anywhere else. And maybe there's lots of places that do. I'm just not a part of those. And so I'm just wondering if people are good with the chat, if everybody's okay with it, then I'll be supportive of it. If there's a way to include a link with our posting of the agenda and say, if you'd like to comment, please submit your public comments, by this time, just right before the meeting here, I'm supportive of that idea too. Just another thought of how we could do it if there's not consensus on the chat option. But if everybody else is okay with it, then I'll support that.
I think you've raised, both of you, some very valid concerns. We did do some benchmarking on this to see what others have done, but I think it would provide certainly an opportunity for anyone that wants to provide thoughtful comments if we had a separate mechanism or a link for them to do so.
I totally agree 100% emphatically with everything in me that we want the public comment. We want the public's input. We want to take the comment. And we do that in all arenas that we're a part of. I'm thinking in city council meeting, we have people come and participate and on occasion they want to speak in public comment and I will call on them and they'll speak. But so please don't misunderstand. I'm in no way trying to discourage public comment, just trying to figure out the best way to receive it and have it be, appropriately received anyway.
Thank you, Mayor. Other comments or questions?
This is April. I just wanted to say I'm okay with someone speaking public comment or putting it in the chat while we're in the Zoom meeting because it's a very defined time frame. I think that's important that on the YouTube, it's not considered public comment because people could continue to do that for days or weeks or years. And we can't necessarily constantly go back to see if there's a new comment. So my opinion is that, just something as simple as, if somebody had a scratchy throat that day or laryngitis or something and couldn't speak, I certainly want them to be able to get on chat and have a different method for getting their question across or their comment. But I think it should be within the confines of a certain time frame during the meeting.
Thank you, April. Other comments? Let me ask you, Alan. Go ahead, please. I thought maybe someone started to make a comment. I was going to ask you, Alan, whether there's anything that has been said that would keep us from taking action at this time. Is there additional modification, or do you feel like that we're prepared to go forward with this without further modification?
I'm certainly open to change, and I think some good points have been made. I don't know that it was explicit, but the intent of saying that we would accept comments during the board meeting were, I think, directed at April's comment that it be during the period of the meeting itself. We do have opportunities for public comment separate from this because we've got a website that accepts comments. We put out newsletters regularly and solicit public input. Our info at thepointutah.org allows people to call in or write in and share comments. So I think we've provided a number of mechanisms for people to be involved. I'm not really terribly concerned about that. We just want to, probably for public records purposes and others, be able to define what would constitute a record and what might not, what would be a public comment and what might not. So if you feel that using the chat function is not appropriate, we can certainly make some changes to this draft and bring it back or approve it with contingent upon making those changes, whichever you'd prefer.
Thank you. Mayor Ramsey, are do you have any objection? And we don't have a motion on the table yet for discussion, but do you have any input at this point whether it's ready to take action, or do you think more work needs to be done?
I do, because I just got a text from Governor-elect Spencer Cox that said he had to join his listen only because it kept kicking him out. But he also thinks it's a big mistake to allow public comment in the Zoom chat, and feels like there's perhaps that might not be the best way to make it an official public comment. So with that, knowing that that is how he feels too, I'd love to see if we can. Could we accept public comment as part of it, since there are so many mechanisms and people can attend this meeting virtually the same way we are, and they do, which we appreciate, and they have the opportunity to be called on for public comment. Can we either add another way that they can include a public comment to this meeting by a deadline or something, and remove the chat feature as an official public comment, the Zoom chat as an official public comment?
So let me see if I can help there. Mayor, it sounds to me like that comment or your question is really the basis for a motion, which I'm believing. Excuse me, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. And we'll just see where the vote lies, and if everybody else, how they feel about this. But I move that we approve this, these amended procedures that have been presented, with the exception of the chat feature on Zoom being official public comment. I'd like to have that removed, and to add a link to our public noticing, and whether that takes them to the website or somewhere else where we already receive public comment, so people are able to give public comment with a defined amount of time, a deadline, to this meeting. And I would also propose that we keep the opportunity for people to speak public comment in this meeting, by giving a heads up and being called on by the chair, but not to make the Zoom chat an official public comment.
Okay, let me see if I can restate the motion. The motion is that we would approve this policy that has been presented by our director, with the exception that we would remove that portion that allowed chat and Zoom communications from the public to become part of the public record. Is that correct?
All except the Zoom communication by someone attending the Zoom. If you were to call on them, when you open public comment portion, yes, if you call on them, public record.
That's acceptable.
Yes. If they attend the meeting and say, I'd like to give public comment the way they would if we were there in person, and the chair calls on them and they have the opportunity to turn their screen on and give us the same way you do any public comment, please give us your name and address for the record, or whatever it is that the protocol would be for accepting official record public comment. And
is that part of your motion with respect to chat as well?
No, my motion would be to not accept Zoom chat as official public comment.
All right. So let me take another crack at it then, that we accept the policy with the exception. Your motion is that we accept the policy with the exception that Zoom comments made during the part of the agenda that allows for public comment be accepted and made part of the record. Otherwise, the Zoom communications and chat communications would not be part of the public record. Is that state your motion?
Correct. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have a second to that motion?
This is Dave. I second that.
Thank you, Dave, for the second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the policy as presented with those exceptions or clarifications. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me. Wait a minute. I apologize. Don't vote yet. It's been moved and seconded, and I needed to call for discussion on the motion. So we won't take a vote until you have a chance to weigh in on the motion if you would like to.
Yeah, let me say this, Representative Snow. I mean, I don't have a problem with the chat portion being included in public comment. I'm going to support the motion the way that Mayor has amended it. That's fine. But it's going to be just interesting to see going forward if this is addresses really the needs for public transparency. So, I mean, we all know we're in a new world here, but let's just kind of see where it goes. I'm happy to support it with that comment.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion to the motion?
If I can just add to that, I agree with you because that's how it's done so common right now. It may not be adequate in the future, but I think it is fairly standard right now across the board. And so I appreciate that we as a board have the flexibility, just as we are now, to make amendments should we determine that we need to.
Alan, would it be possible when the agenda is posted that information can be included so the public would know how to get onto the Zoom to make public comment during that time?
Yes, in fact, part of our policy says that we include our public comment policy on the agenda itself. So anybody that goes to the agenda sees all the rules.
Perfect. Thank you.
I appreciate that clarification. In my mind, that was happening. That I agree. That was what I anticipated. So thank you.
Further discussion on the motion? Not seeing any hands and not hearing anyone speaking up. Now I believe it's proper for a vote on the mayor's motion. All in favor of the motion as it has been stated. Do you have a question, Representative? No, you're voting. Okay. All in favor of the motion as it's been stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your good work. And Alan, thank you for your work as well.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda is I asked our director to put this on the agenda to discuss some potential changes to existing legislation that created the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority relating to conflict of interest. You will recall from the original statute that we have a provision that allows Draper City representation, the mayor or a member of the council, and we also have a very specific provision that talks about inability to own property within a 5-mile radius of the prison site. It was important when I drafted the legislation that we have representation from Draper City because obviously the project is within its limits. There's specific provisions of the statute that require coordination with Draper City and provisions that relate to the services that will be provided by Draper City to the project. I don't think that the matter is ripe yet for involved discussion, and so in thinking about it, what I would like to do as chair, taking chair's prerogative, is back up a little bit, slow this process down, and I've asked a couple of people to be part of a working group to help review the statute and that balance and see if it's okay or whether it ought to be addressed. I've asked Senator Fillmore, and I'm asking Mayor Ramsey, I gave her some forenotice as well by text, if they would help be part of a group to help review that. We'll put this back on the agenda for next month for review again and hear the recommendations of this group. And maybe the recommendations will be to leave everything as is. But this doesn't require formal motion, but I wanted to let you know, I hope you're all okay with that action. If there's anyone that would really like to be part of that working group, you can let me know. But I'm thinking, Mayor Ramsey and Senator Fillmore, that you would work with Alan, our director, and also our legal counsel, JC, and probably myself to address this, take a look at this issue, and then we'll bring it back in January. Is that okay with everyone? All right, then. Thank you very much. And Mayor and Senator Fillmore, that's agreeable. You'll help with that issue?
Yes, happy to.
Yes. Very good. So we'll take on the next matter on the agenda, which is to get an update on the planning team selection process. Steve, you've been patient and with us throughout the meeting. We appreciate you being here and for your ongoing support. As you all know from our earlier discussion, we're in the final selection process. We thought it'd be a good idea, Steve, if you could update us on how it's gone.
I would say, okay, so general trending across the firms. I think we are seeing some deep penetration on sustainability. I think we're also seeing some fairly sophisticated modeling in terms of land use allocation. I think one of the most, I think they're all fairly, similar on transportation. In fact, because we already have, we know we're going to have mass transit across the site. There's some different ideas on how that line would actually interface with the community in terms of, I can't say anything fun. But I would say that one of the more interesting dynamics is the idea of density on the site. We gave them a sort of a plug-in land use program just to use for the charrette. And there's been quite a bit of discussion about, well, we could possibly go denser than that. Or if that was our program, could we do that with a reduced footprint and create more open space? And then, of course, if we reduce the footprint and create more open space, then that increases construction costs, but it also reduces horizontal land development costs. And so the interplay between sort of verticality and horizontality of the built form and the actual amount of general GFA, gross floor area, is, I think, that has been clearly identified as a sort of dynamic, which when we get into the real planning process, we can have a lot of fun with, testing. And also linking the economics into that, of course, so that it's not just an academic exercise. There have been some interesting discussions about parking. Are we going to be sort of conventional in terms of parking and every building has parking next to it or inside of it? Or might there be some more progressive ideas that allow us to, have maybe a blend between dedicated parking and community parking? And then there's also been some ideas and debate about, could there be some areas that are auto-free and where the cars are all kept around the edges, and we actually have more of a campus concept with, a pedestrian-only zone. There's been quite a bit of ideas about the innovation district and concept. Some firms showing more, some less, in terms of digging deep into what really makes an innovation district work. And also, I would say the other area that I'm pleased with is in the open space and landscape, in that it's not just we're going to have parks and open space, but what are the different types and uses of park and open space? Is there agriculture? Is there ecological components? Is there intensive day use? Is there urban open space, suburban open space, programmed sports? And so that there's and some of the firms have brought on specialists to help dig deeper into that particular, component. So I would just summarize by saying that these are very top firms. We have a lot of smart people in these firms. These firms clearly want to win this. And our little budget, that we gave them, for the competition, I think they use that, in the first 15 minutes. They're way past that. So this project is really drawn, I think, literally the top talent in the country, and I'm excited, and you should as well, anticipating what's going to come out the other side.
Thank you, Steve. I get
How was that?
That was great, and you gave us just enough to whet our appetites, and I'm excited as a board to hear more in depth. Hopefully, in our next meeting. This is exciting, and there's a lot of great things that you said. But the one thing that stood out in my mind was when you said they're enthusiastic or excited about this project, and so we're hoping for big things. Any questions for Steve about the process that he can answer without giving too much detail?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask a question, and you can rule me out of order based upon the question or not.
Okay.
And it may be out of order, but we can address this in executive next week. Are any of these three that you're down to, are these Utah firms or are these out-of-state firms?
They're all out-of-state firms, although some of them do have Utah representation. They either have Utah offices in Salt Lake, but most of the, I would say, the force of the firms are outside, but they do have, a couple of them have representation, and then they're also bringing in local firms as subconsultants as well on some of them.
Terrific. We can discuss this more on Tuesday. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Other questions for Steve? I have a question. You've touched upon it somewhat. I'm assuming that in the presentations that they all recognize that transportation issue would be is a challenge, or could be a challenge, and would you say that that's something that all of them attempted to address in some form?
Well, I think they're all looking towards progressive, non-conventional transportation solutions, and they brought on, either they have some really top talent within their firms, or they brought on subconsultants that have national reputations in sort of, I use the term progressive transportation, design. So I think there's a lot of that there. I think the sort of more conventional traffic modeling, and impacts on sort of outside the site and sub-regional. In our scope, we've identified the fact that we already have, our regional organizations you guys have really sophisticated modeling in place, and they will be teaming with those organizations to run regional transportation models to measure off-site impact. So they're not talking a lot about that because they realize that infrastructure is kind of in place and that program's in place. But no, I think we're going to see a lot of creativity on the transportation side from any of the firms.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you for your consulting services. We rely heavily on your expertise and opinion.
It's an honor.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is somewhat related. With all of the publicity that we've been generating, Muriel, a great job there, and people are starting to take note, and with that comes a lot of interest and proposals. So Alan, our director, thought it was a good idea, and I think he had some input from JC Skinner too, that it would be wise for us to develop some criteria for reviewing proposals that are being made for uses of the project. So Alan, we'll turn time to you, and Steve. I think Steve has had been a part of that discussion as well.
Thank you, Representative, and yeah, very much so. Just again, I think you've touched it well. We've had a number of individuals contact us with potential ideas for the site, some more developed than others. And I think moving forward, it's important that we have a process in place to ensure that we have a standardized, objective way of evaluating the ideas that come in, and that we have standards for how much information they provide and when, and the gatekeeper function that allows us to make some rough cuts early on and not spend too much time on projects that are not promising, but then able to delve in more to those that might have more promise. And so Steve has taken the lead on putting together some initial thoughts. This is just for your information. It's kind of early in the process, but wanted to show you some of our early thinking and get your input on it. So I'll turn it to Steve to kind of share what he's put together.
And this is, I do have a more detailed memo that sort of walks through this, which we can make available to you. I just thought I would keep it on the, because we're short of time, keep it really kind of down to one slide, and which I'll kind of walk you through. And what we've come up with is kind of a 4-stage process where, as you'll see it kind of evolve, but it starts with this notion of a gateway. You all are probably familiar with this, but number of cities have that especially are in hot growth areas that have a lot of activity and a lot of development proposals create a gateway component where they create a committee, and that committee looks at incoming proposals and then and sort of judges them on some basic criteria. Is it consistent with the overall values and goals of the general plan, the zoning, or in their cases, in the city? In ours, it would be, is it consistent with our key vision elements? Is there enough information? Is there a level of sponsorship that has credibility? Is there any hope of it being economically viable? And we would create kind of a scoring as we need to on all of these things, right? So there's kind of a public record, and it looks like it's semi-objective, or it is semi-objective, not just looks like it. And so this gateway would be the first step. And so, and it doesn't mean that if you didn't make it through the gateway, you were done. You would be deferred with cause, and you would understand why, what was missing from a particular proposal. Once it got, it qualified through the gateway process, and of course the gateway committee would be the participants in that need to be determined. It could be from working groups, it could be members from the board to be determined. But then there would be a more detailed sort of stage 2 of project definition. And this is when we would work with the proponent to, really develop in more depth, their alignment with the particular key vision elements, what their a preliminary idea of land organization and building program. What is the funding strategy, and is it, is it fully can it be developed more, and help them develop it more? And we use the term return on investment, which is a complicated term, but the idea is there's 2 ways of sort of measuring return on investment. One is very simple. It's like, okay, it's going to cost either land and or capital from the authority, and then what is the return in terms of basic job and economic generation. As we saw in the previous presentation, there are metrics to do that. And there's also a second way, which is a little bit more abstract and complicated, which gets into quality of life and open space and trails and ecological benefits, which and we would study those 2 options and put a little bit more meat on the bones. And then there would also be an evaluation sort of mechanism to rank these, because there's only so much land, and especially in the first phases, because this project will be phased, as any large project is, and the first projects that go into the first phase would need to meet a certain threshold of value, and alignment. And so there could be a scoring mechanism that if you achieve that, you could be a viable candidate. And if you do, then the board, this would come to you all then, our thought is, and then you would all agree or disagree that it would go to the next step, which is proof of concept. And proof of concept, of course, is where you've actually demonstrated that you have a real project, that it really has legs, and it's on the verge of implementation. You have much more detailed land planning and building programs. Your partnerships are actually documented with MOUs. There's a capital stack of financial strategy that is verified, that those funds are available and real. And then there's actual land planning and facilities planning, prototyping that would occur to really validate the land requirement and the density and the building forms. Now, what I've been remiss in doing is talk about how each one of these would impact the actual land planning. The gateway qualification, there would be none because they're not there yet. And the project definition, if it actually achieves that level, we would start looking at where it would go, and we would have a flexible land reservation sort of component that would say, okay, well, this is where it could go, and this is about how much land, but we're not making any commitments yet. And then at proof of concept, though, we're actually plugging it in. Once it achieves that level of approval, it would be plugged in and become a real part of the land plan. And then after approval of the proof of concept, we would actually initiate implementation, where we'd actually start to do it, get the funding, start building, and initiate the partnerships, integrated into the land plan, and there would be detailed money spent on detailed building and land development. So that was the idea, is to have these. It seems kind of, it's basically 3 steps that get you to, a green light, and each one with higher levels of detail, and the gateway concept trying to minimize the impact on everybody's time on those that are not sort of at the same level as others. If we wanted to do this, our next steps would be, we need to have a document that we would distribute to sort of talk about this process. Nothing fancy, just so it puts it in writing. And then we would develop these criteria and for the gateway and the concept package and proof of concept, start to gin those up, and so we could look at them and see if they make sense to everybody.
Thank you, Steve. And I don't want to cut you or short or Alan with your presentation, but are you ready to take questions?
That is it, yes. Mm-hmm.
Questions on this process? Stephen, I've got a question. In terms of timing, is this better accomplished after some sort of a general master plan is completed, or could this be done now? It seems like if I'm interested in doing something there, I'm very interested in what the master plan looks like, and I guess but maybe it's important that we get the criteria in place even before we have that. I don't know. What's your thinking?
I thank you for bringing that up. I did not talk about the dimension of time. There's a couple of ideas there. First of all, to answer your question, I think it can be independent of the development of the master plan. I mean, these are really ideas, right? I mean, and it's an ideas about parks and recreation. It's an idea about a particular innovation or incubator concept. It's a biosciences campus. It's whatever it is. At this point, these are ideas. They know we have land, and they think this is a good place to implement this idea. So I think this process could initiate, next week. I don't think it needs to wait for anything. However, there is a component that we did talk about related to time, and that is actually kind of tranching the proposals into increments related to time. And that is that because we don't want to end up with a first come, first serve kind of dynamic. We want to be able to have multiple ideas and proposals sort of competing with each other, for the good land, right? And so the best projects get in the gate. So the idea is to, we don't, for instance, let's say every quarter, there's a gateway meeting, or let's say every month there's a gateway meeting. Every quarter those that go through the gateway, there's a validation, meeting on the other steps, or every 6 months. But it seems like if gateways occurred monthly and then the other evaluations occurred quarterly, it would kind of allow us to get groups of ideas together and be able to compare them with each other. Now, of course, final definition of what plugs in, in 6 months, we're going to have a framework plan. And in the second 6 months of next year, we're going to be jumping into the design of phase 1. And I used to call them, sector plans, but I'm realizing now, looking at what's coming at us, is there's it's less of a sectors of single use and much more of a multi-use kind of pattern that's coming out here, which I think is fine. But so it really becomes more of an increment of phasing. So as we design phase 1 in the second part of the year, it would be helpful to have a couple of, let's call them anchor tenants or anchor projects that would help us form up that first phase. And so by the middle of next year, it would be nice to have gone through this process on the ideas and have some leading candidates for that first phase.
This is April. I'd like to hear if Erin has any thoughts about projects that she's potentially seen in the past where these, early bird good ideas out there that didn't even know we were to that point at all.
You're muted, Erin.
You're on mute.
April, excuse me, who was that directed to?
Erin talking.
Erin.
Erin.
I'm
Okay.
thinking, clearly there's people that jump on this stuff early because they don't want to miss it. But then there's other people that'll be like, well, wait, I didn't even know you were taking proposals yet, or we didn't give enough public notice, or we didn't communicate well enough. But then if we just flat out go out there and say, okay, here's our process now, then we might have a flood of ideas before we've even got to master planning. I just wanted to kind of hear Erin's experience from other projects around the country when you have these early birds kind of pushing you, but you might have other ideas that end up being the better ones.
Well, she's
So, Erin, we can't hear you. I don't know whether we need to unmute you.
No, she's not muted.
Mhm.
She's got a local problem there. Erin, speak again. Try it again.
Better now.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Just lost you. Oh, there she is.
Your connection, Erin, may be.
I think we're good. So
We can a little bit, but it still breaks up a little bit. Why don't you try going off your video? See if
because the host unmuted Alan, Steve, CC, everybody's on unmute, so I think it's getting too much noise. So I think everybody else needs to mute.
Okay. Are we good? I'm sorry. On April's comment, I was just, I'll keep it brief since I just took a couple minutes of your time, realizing my audio wasn't working. I think that what Steve's outlined is a very solid process to move forward with. And the hardest question is how we make sure that interested parties know that there's an opportunity. And so, what we've seen elsewhere is that this process is a good way to vet candidates that come in. And I do think that as people are aware that we're doing this, we will have interested parties, and we are going to have to prioritize pieces. What we've seen in other projects is that the hardest part is that you don't want to give away too much too soon, right? You want to really have those first projects that you approve through this process be really impactful. Things that really move the needle. And the benefit of having some of these groups or these potential partners in early on is that they can help us drive the planning. these are the types of projects that we might actually see or approve before we really have a master plan out are actually going to be some of the most significant opportunities. It might be that the university consortium that we talked about earlier today says we really have this idea for how a hospital would work here, or how a research campus would work here, or how a satellite campus would work here. Like, let's talk about it. Let's really put it through the paces and say, do we want to do this, and integrate it into the actual master plan. Or other ideas that I think will likely come from the private sector. The risk is always that you aren't necessarily asking for broad ideas, right? So you aren't necessarily seeing every idea under the sun related to a medical campus at the same time. That's the hardest part of this process, is that you do have to, at some point decide that you like the horse that's available to you, as opposed to, the ones that we don't know that exist yet. So, I think the short answer is that this is obviously a process that we need to make sure that people know that we are interested and available to discuss, as opposed to this being something that they receive when they call us. And I think that's, in the short term, the way that we make sure that we're seeing the best options out there.
I would also just add that this time tranching is meant to address the issue of no first come, first serve, to avoid that it could be that there are no even preliminary decisions made, or even into the proof of concept, until the middle of next year. So there's a good amount of time. We have time to gather proposals and to guide them through a validation process before anybody needs to decide anything.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve and April, for your question. Any other questions at this juncture? Maybe just a quick one, Alan. I know we're getting short on time. Alan and Steve, when would you anticipate actually undertaking this process, establishing this process? Is this something you would be looking at working on in the next 30, 60 days, or something further downstream?
I think we'd work on it right away, because we have them coming in the door right now, and it's awkward not to be able to respond.
Sure.
So, to be able to respond, with a definitive process and a definitive list of information that's needed to sort of get in the queue. I don't see why. I don't see any reason that we wouldn't try and put this in. I mean, if my fantasy scenario would be the first of the year, but let's just say it's not the first of the year, but it's early next year.
Do you need any? It's not on the agenda for action, but do you need something formal, Alan, to move forward?
Well, we don't need a motion necessarily, but I think we'd like the sense of the board, whether this is a direction that makes sense, and if you'd like us to continue to refine these ideas to bring back to you potentially at the next meeting.
We don't need a motion, but I agree with you. I'd like some sense, and if someone wants to make a motion, I think it would be appropriate.
Larry, I'm going to make a motion. I want this. Steve agrees with what the other Steve just presented. I think it's a terrific path. So I would move that we accept in concept, that we agree in concept with the outline that Steve, our consultant, Steve Kellenberg, has just outlined to us.
Very good. And that part of your motion would be to direct our director to work with Steve and move forward?
Amended that way, sir, yes.
Motion, I think you've heard that. Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second before it dies? I guess procedurally the motion fails for lack of a second. So we will move forward. So Alan, maybe you and I can talk and we'll put this back on the agenda, one of our subsequent meetings. The last matter on the agenda is the RCLCO update. Aaron, you've been also very patient. You're the last matter on the agenda. We'll turn the time to you for an update on the work that you've been doing.
And before you jump in,
Before I do that, Alan, I apologize. I skipped over item number 11. So Aaron, if it's okay, if you'll wait. Alan, why don't you talk about the results of the survey you sent out?
Okay, and we'll try to do this quickly because I understand that our time is limited. But we did send out a survey this last week, asked for your input on a couple of things, and really there are two main purposes for this survey. One, because during the charrettes we heard from some of the planning firms asking questions about the relative priority among the objectives that have been set out in statute and through public input. And the other is that I really wanted to seed a discussion around this concept of trade-offs that Erin kicked off in her presentation in October. That we do have a number of objectives that have been presented to us, everything from sustainability to open space, innovation, jobs, transportation, affordability, revenues, paying for the prison, etc. And it presents a challenge as we start to think about how these things are prioritized. Now, we're not trying to create a false dichotomy here, because I think we all recognize and want to make it very clear that good quality of life in this area is going to help economic development and vice versa. So these aren't just polar extremes, but the fact is, from time to time, some of the goals will compete with each other, and we need to get a sense for how the board would prioritize how we proceed. So we did ask for your input on how we would balance this general quality of life to economic development spectrum. We heard back from 6 board members. These are the results. Weighted certainly toward economic development. And we heard a number of comments that were shared that I think were really helpful and very much aligned. You can see saying that there was a promise to the taxpayers that we would create an economic engine, that we need to balance quality of life and the economy, but we really need to deliver an economic boost to the state. Recognition that this is an opportunity for a return on our investment in the form of revenues to local communities in the state. And so we need to offset some of the costs of infrastructure in the state and create an economic engine that generates new revenues. And another comment, again, recognizing the challenge of finding the right balance. It can't be all one or the other, but we need to lean on the economic side. So those are the results we heard. This isn't a decision by the board saying we're done with this conversation. It really is a beginning. And the hope is that this will give us a little direction to get started with our planning teams, but we'll be visiting with you on a regular basis as we work through some of these potential conflicts of priorities. So wanted to at least start that conversation and see if anybody had any thoughts on what you saw in this survey.
Thank you, Alan. Questions for Alan? Comments? Thanks again, Alan. We're going to move forward with the last item on the agenda. And Aaron, thanks again for being patient. So please use this time and update us on your work on the analysis and your recommendation.
Of course. I'm going to pull up maybe just one slide, I think, instead of keeping you all for a lot longer today. One thing that we've discussed, and really where our work is focused right now, is on this idea of a real business plan for the site and for the organization. And that ultimately comes down to the development strategy, which integrates things we've talked about, like what's the organization's role, what are the market economics and the land values of the site, how do we want to interact with the public, how much is infrastructure going to cost, how do we balance those goals that Alan just shared, and how do we think about the value of some of these potential proposals that might come in through Steve's process. And while that starts to be a lot of variables, I have this very bad diagram of a prism that I found online, but I do think that a prism is actually a very apt analogy for how this process works, right? Which is that while we're going to look at it as a whole at the end of the day, what we're actually trying to do is have the opportunity to see how each of these individual pieces function and how they change the results and relate to the others. And so this is something that I previewed with Alan last week in some different pieces. And we've talked about some of these different roles. You all have seen this before, and I think ultimately the hardest question that's going to come down to it is how do we really dig into the much more nitty-gritty detail of what a master developer does or a future developer does, and what do you do? And so that's what we're working out through this process, is to actually start to put some real numbers on things like, let's just make some assumptions about who does what, how much the land is worth, how the transaction might work. And this is why you have planners involved, because this is my level of diagramming. But thinking this through, some of the different options that we started to talk to you all about range from, what if we had a more limited role, right, where we really had oversight, but we weren't actually, driving or making decisions on, exactly how different pieces of the site work. What if we had a middle role, which I think is where we've landed, at least the current hypothesis. We're going to do a little bit more than the minimum amount of infrastructure, but we could really, leave a lot of execution to other people. And what if we did a lot more, which I think we've heard loud and clear is not the direction that we're going here, right? This would mean, you all really are building all these roads and building all these parks and, finding people for all of these little blocks that are created. And, ultimately the hardest question that we're going to answer, in this model, as well as in the planning process, is, what's the value of the site, and what are the things that we want to build there or need to build on site in order to create that value, in terms of roads and infrastructure and parks and educational facilities and everything else that we've decided we value. And so, this is, I think, just a quick update to say that we're very close to putting some real numbers on a lot of these questions. And I think that Alan and I have discussed the idea that maybe in January, it'll be the appropriate time to spend a much longer portion of this meeting, filling you in on some of those much more specifics and how that thinking is advanced. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, but I also recognize it's, much past our meeting time slot.
Thank you, Aaron. This is really timely at where you are in this discussion, and as we begin the actual master planning. And I can't tell you, at least for me, how helpful this is. But I agree that I think we need to, Alan, allocate some additional time, probably in January, because this becomes now a really important discussion as we begin the planning stage, at least to my way of thinking.
Yeah, and the interesting things that Steve and I have heard from the planning teams through some of their different work sessions and charrettes over the last couple of weeks, just make some of these questions even more salient. Because we'll be working with those planners in a very iterative fashion once they're on, the final team's on board, to test their concepts and and help make sure that the project we're designing is something that we can actually build.
Right.
You know, but that we're also being appropriately aspirational about what we're trying to achieve here. So, you know, the hardest part is going to be this cost bar, right? You know, are we talking about costs that are here or here or here or here? And here is bad because here means that there's a large subsidy relative to the value that we're generating. And I think we've heard loud and clear that that's not the goal of this site.
Questions for Aaron from the board? Well, thank you, Aaron. And we're a little bit past time. It's been a good meeting. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground, and we've taken action that was important. Thank you for being here. I won't spend a lot of time saying goodbyes. Just again, appreciate your input. Alan, we will plan on meeting again next week. Is it Tuesday, 4:15?
Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and we'll be sending out an invitation with the link on it.
Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So we'll get that on our calendar. Any final comments that not comments, but anything that needs to be brought up that's somewhat critical before we sign off? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Representative. Second, please.
Second from Val.
Thanks. Second. Perfect. As your final
Sign
second.
off.
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thanks to you again. Stay safe and healthy out there.